Okay, this is actually being recorded, so if you need to leave or if you want to share it with other people, I will be sending the recording out later on this afternoon to everyone that is on the webinar. Okay, so this is the application workshop for the ZoomGrants will open on July 1st of 2021, and the grants will go through, won't actually begin until July 1 of 2022. So just a little bit of the history of it is, sorry, moving things around here so I can actually see. Is that they combine 6 programs into the CDBG program. And what is CDBG? For the Community Development Block Grant Program. I'm going to mute some people. Hold on one second. I apologize.
Oh my God. What happened?
Okay. So we are the the small city program, the non-entitlement program. And so that is 50,000 people or fewer, cities with 50,000 or fewer, counties with fewer than 200. And we get the actual allocation and disperse that out to our units of local government. And these are the eligible cities and counties for the CDBG program. The ones in red, those your 51% or higher with your cities or your counties. You just want to be kind of careful with those because there are in some of the cities and some of the counties, there are block groups that may not qualify as an LMI area. So you just kind of want to watch those and be careful with those. I will be showing you a mapping tool that ZoomGrants has on it and kind of going in a little bit deeper in there. The mapping tool is great. We use that all the time, even when we have some people outside of our grant administrators contact us to see if their projects are eligible. Sub-recipients contact us and we refer them back to that mapping tool. With sub-recipients, the cities and counties can sponsor nonprofits, for-profits. However, the grant agreement is always going to be the city or county and the state of Nevada. And then the city or county must have a sub-recipient agreement in place with those sub-recipients. Those sub-recipient agreements are really simple. It's pretty much, this is what the sub-recipient is going to do and what they're responsible for, and this is what the city and the county is responsible for. So the states, let me put that person on mute. Okay. What the state is responsible for is really designing the program. We set the funding requirements. We're also setting the allocation. So we have an advisory committee that reviews all of our applications and makes recommendations. We're also establishing the financial management, record keeping, closeout, and we're ensuring that the cities and counties are complying with the state and federal regulations also. So CDBG, the state program, we have wide latitude to design our program. And, you know, we pretty much, it hasn't really changed since I've been here. I've been here for 6 years now, and we've kind of kept it the same way. We were tasked when CDBG came into GoEd to have larger projects with more of an economic development impact to the communities. So the responsibility of the cities and counties are to decide what type of activities they want to apply for, the citizen participation, which we'll go over a little bit further on in the presentation, and then to carry out those activities and to make sure that they are complying as well as their subrecipients are complying with the federal and state regulations. Do you have any questions on that portion of it? Okay, so we're going to go into the HUD outcome statements. So HUD has 3 of them: expanding economic opportunity, providing suitable living environment, and providing decent housing. So providing suitable living, or I'm sorry, providing economic opportunity. This is really, you're creating new jobs, you're increasing the income to the community, you're sidewalk projects, you're bringing people downtown to bringing new businesses into your downtown or into your community, providing suitable living environment. Really, this is, you're creating parks, you're creating a place that people want to be. And then providing decent housing. This has been in there forever. Excuse me. And we're really just, wanting to make sure that your communities are places that people want to be in. And that's what community development is all about. So I always love to show this because it's amazing to me that from 1982, and we just awarded our 2021 grants, we've spent over $1 million in rural Nevada. And to me, that is just amazing. So $82 million of that has gone to public facilities and public service grants. And I just think that that is, it's kind of a really big thing for CDBG and for our rural communities. So national objectives. Sorry, let me go back. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, I'm going to move on. And you can always put your questions in the chat also, and I can take a look at those. And then you can contact me if you have questions after the presentation and you kind of remember them afterwards. I know a lot of us do that. You can contact me and we can have a conversation. So national objectives, there's 3, and benefit 51% of low to moderate income persons, aid in the prevention or elimination of slum and blight, and address an urgent need. We don't typically do urgent need just because with regular CDBG, because we just received all of that CDBG CV funding, which is was considered kind of an urgent need, but we will go over the requirements for urgent need. Excuse me. So we're going to start off with the low to moderate income persons, 51% or higher. We're going to go over area benefit, clientele, housing, and jobs. So with the area benefit, it's pretty self-explanatory. You want to make sure that the activity is going to benefit that area. And again, we'll go into the mapping tool and show you how you can do that and what you need to make sure to have in order to prove out that it's an LMI-A area. And so there's 3 ways that you can do it. The Census, which is also the mapping tool. If you look at your area and you go to the mapping tool and it says this area is not LMI, you can always do an income survey to say, yes, it actually is an LMI area. Income surveys those are good for 5 years. So just keep that in mind that if you're looking at maybe dropping out of LMI area, or that you're looking at an area and saying, hey, this is not what the mapping tool says or the LMI-SD says, you can always do a survey and it will be good for 5 years. So LMI-C, which is clientele, we're wanting to make sure that 51% of the clientele is LMI. And then these are presumed categories. So these categories, they're just presumed to be LMI-C. So if you're doing a project for like people who are elderly, senior centers, a lot of that is with the LMI-C. Boys and Girls Club would be a low to moderate income clientele. Also, the health centers, those would also be low to moderate income clientele, and they have their own way of showing that that 51% of their clientele is low to moderate income. Okay, so the documentation, again, I just talked about them having some of those areas have their own documentation. We also have income certifications. Those have not been posted on the website yet. They will be posted to our website. They just updated those July 1, they'll be posted to the website. So you can go and pull those and use those as a tool to see if 51% of your clientele is LMI. Again, these are just some of the projects that you can do with LMI-C is the removal of architectural barriers. Again, that's like an ADA project. We do a lot of ADA projects. Carson City does quite a few of those. The city of Fallon has done a couple of those. And then so reconstruction of a public facility, helping micro enterprises, and then job training. So job creation and retention, those projects are going to, if you're going to create jobs, they're going to benefit at least 51% of the jobs are going to benefit low to moderate income persons. And it is computed on a full-time equivalent basis for a 2-year span. And so for every $35,000 of CDBG funding that you request, one full-time equivalent base job, LMI job needs to be created. So that's the same with retention. You know, you want to make sure that 51% of the people that you're retaining are LMI. Again, you have to track that for 2 years. And then these are just some general projects that you can do. The acquiring real property, like for a business incubator. Again, you're going to want to make sure that you're checking and 51% of that is going to be LMI, technical assistance, those type of jobs. And then housing, we don't do too much with housing any longer. We used to when I first started. The difficulty with that is that the housing division receives a lot more funding than we do. And so it just made more sense to have them take over housing projects, and we would do more of the economic development project. However, if you have a housing project and you want to discuss that with us, please feel free to give us a call and we can talk that through. So we're going to go to SLUM and BLIGHT. There's 2 ways that you can do SLUM and BLIGHT, and that's an area basis or a spot basis. So we're going to go through area basis first. An area basis, if you're going to do that, it must be a designated area by your local government, and it must define the SLUM and BLIGHT, the deterioration, and it must fall under the state or local law. And then to be an area basis, it needs to be at least 25% of the properties must have one of these conditions: physical deterioration, environmental contaminants, any one of those, and we can have that conversation on those. So this is just the documentation that you are going to need to make sure that you have, defining the boundaries, describing the activities, addressing the condition, and then reviewing and issuing a redetermination every 10 years to requalify. And so if you have a SLUM and BLIGHT area, you need to send that in to us so that we can review it and take a look at it and make sure that it qualifies under SLUM and BLIGHT. And then these are just the activities that we would do: acquisition and clearance of the blighted property, removal again of contaminants, rehabilitation, and commercial revitalization through facade improvements. We can do the outside of the building, but we cannot do the inside of the building. So the one thing I will say with area SLUM and BLIGHT that's better is when you go to do an environmental assessment, you're doing it on the complete area that is designated. Where with SLUM and BLIGHT, the spot SLUM and BLIGHT, you're doing it on each individual property. So just keep that in mind when you're if you're wanting to do a SLUM and BLIGHT property, sorry. So for spot BLIGHT, you're going to want to make sure that it's outside of any designated area. So it can't be inside of the designated area. It has to be a property that's outside of that. If you're doing acquisition or relocation, it must have a follow-up activity that's going to benefit the community. And so we can, again, talk with those. We've done a couple SLUM and BLIGHT projects for CDBG. So we're still kind of a little bit new to those. So we are kind of learning as we go with the SLUM and BLIGHT. Okay, so the documentation, again, is just describing the location and the property, and then identifying the activity that you are going to be doing. If it's clearance, if it's an acquisition, and then you're going to send that in to us. So we're going to go on to urgent need. Again, we don't do too much of the urgent need, and this is part of the reason why is that the urgent need needs to be serious and needs to pose a serious and immediate threat to the community and health and welfare of the community. Also needs to be a recent origin, and no other funding can go into that. So the community can't finance it. There's no other funding that can finance this project. And then you would come to CDBG. You also need to make sure that there is a declaration of the emergency from local or state. So for CDBG CV, urgent need would be the COVID-19. And we ask that you contact us prior to submitting that on your eligibility. Okay, so is there any questions about national objectives? So I always find it that when you're going to do a CDBG project, that fitting into a national objective is always harder than fitting it into an activity, an eligible activity for CDBG, because we have a bunch of activities that you can fall under, but making sure that the project is meets a national objective seems to always be kind of that big one to see if we can fit it in there. And that's pretty much what this slide is telling you, is that it must meet a national objective and an eligible activity in order to be fundable. So fundable is just that key threshold that we have. Again, all activities must be eligible for funding, and then all eligible activities must meet the national objective. And this right here is just our eligible activities. We have this on our ZoomGrants library, which I will go over with you guys at the end of the presentation. Also in the library is an expanded version of this that goes into a little bit more detail on each one of these and how they fit in. So I'm not going to go through all of these because in a couple of slides, they're going to go over a little bit more in detail, but public facilities is one that we do a lot of. So clearance, that's going to be more for the SLUM and BLIGHT projects, and then the planning capacity. So public facilities, those are going to be acquisition, construction. So any of your water infrastructure projects, any ADA projects, sidewalk projects, those are going to go into a public facility project. And then these are just the national objectives that you can actually fund the project under. You can do LMI-A, which area, limited clientele, jobs, SLUM and BLIGHT area basis. For economic development, again, you can do acquisition, job training, job retention, rehabilitation, any of those activities. And then again, these are just the national objectives that they would fall under. So low to moderate income jobs, area basis, spot basis. And then we do a lot of planning grants. So the planning grant needs to be a grant that's gonna determine the community need, and it must lead to a project. The City of Wells is doing a great Wells corridor plan. The City of Fernley has done a revitalization or a downtown revitalization plan. Those type of plans that then they may come back to us at a later date and ask for funding, and then they can just show us that plan. The Washoe County did one for Gerlach GERLAC and Economic Development Plan. So we do planning grants, but we just want those to lead to an actual project. Public service, Carson City does a lot of public service grants. So those are just, job training, health services is a big one for them. I think that Carson City has a absentee youth program that they're working on right now. So, and again, they can do, these are the national objectives that they would fall under, area benefit, clientele, SLUM and blight area basis. With public service grants, there are restrictions. So 15% of our allocation can go to public service grants, no more than 15%. The public service grant needs to be a new service or a quantifiable increase to that service from the previous year. So housing activities, again, I'm not going to go too much into this just because we don't do too many housing projects any longer. So do we have any questions on that? Okay. So I'm going to move on to the grant cycle and application process. Like I said, we just awarded our 2021 applications. And so we received 22 proposals from 9 cities and counties by our eligibility due date of October. Those requests were about $7 million. And of those 22, 17 potential grants were moved on to the application phase. And the 17 were a little bit over $5.9 million. And so for our allocation in February, we received our allocation of $3.5 million. However, in mid-May, I did receive an email that our allocation was increased to $3.6 million. So you can see that it's pretty competitive. So you want to make sure that your application states what the project is for, what you need the money for, what the problem is, what the history is, and we'll go through some of those when we go into ZoomGrants. So this is the application process. So step 1 is you're going to hold your first public meeting in July, and really that public meeting is going to be informational. You're going over what the estimated funding for the next year is going to be from CDBG, how much funding your community has gotten, how much funding or what type of projects your community has gotten. You're going to call for any sponsor grants that want to be sponsored by you. You're going to give them the contact person's name, the grant administrator that they need to contact if they want to submit an application, and then the next meeting date. And then you're going to go on to your second public meeting. And this second public meeting is really going to just to go over any any ideas that you've received, any community ideas that you have, and then you're going to give them the date of the third public meeting. Step 1 and step 2 really should be before your eligibility date of October 15th. And then you're going to make sure that all of those grants that you have are in ZoomGrants for eligibility, and make sure that we have the job matrices, which are going to be due September 30th. Again, excuse me. The city and county can have 2 grants go in, and then they can also sponsor 2 grants. At any given time, you can only have 5 grants open. So if you're putting in and you have already 2 grants with CDBG and you're putting in 4 grants, one of your grants needs to be closed by July 1st of 2022 before the new grant cycle goes through. And this excludes any CDBG CV grants, just so everyone knows, because I know there's a lot of grants out there. So your third public meeting is going to be after eligibility. And really this one is going to be so that you can prioritize your applications. With ZoomGrants, you can put in as many eligibilities as you want. You just want to make sure that you're making sure that your project meets the national objective and is a fundable activity, and that you have your scope of work in there and all questions are answered. And then we will go in, determine which ones are actually eligible. And so if you have 5 applications in there and 3 of them are for the county and 2 of them county or city and 2 of them are sponsored grants, you have to decide which grants you want to move forward to application. And once you've done that, that would be at your 3rd public meeting. Once you've done that, then you're going to go back into ZoomGrants, work on those projects. And then the one that was not approved to move forward, you need to archive that out of ZoomGrants and just work on the ones that you have. So you're going to be developing those projects from October 19th to February 22nd of 2022. And in that time frame, you're also going to make sure that we have access to ZoomGrants so that we can review your application and then make sure that you have all of your supporting information in there to be submitted by February 18th. And that should say 2022, I apologize. So then once you've submitted your application, why we ask you to grant us access to ZoomGrants to review your application is because once you've hit submit, we cannot speak with you on your application. It goes to our advisory committee and we can't talk to you on that. So if there are any issues with your application, if your timeline is not correct, if there's a question on your budget, we can't go back and ask you those questions. So we really encourage you to work closely with our office so that if those questions arise, it will be done prior to you hitting submit on those applications. Because once they hit submit, if there's issues, they may not go to the advisory committee. They may just stop right there. So just please keep that in mind when you're thinking of your applications. Work really closely with us. We're always here to help. You can email me, you can call me, any one of those. I am more than happy to sit down and have a conversation with you guys. So once you've hit submit on your application, then you're going to print out one full copy of the application and all backup documentation that you have with that and mail that into our office. Then we set up our advisory committee meeting, which is normally March and April, depending on when we get our allocation, when Congress passes the budget. This year it was in February, so we were on track to go ahead with our allocation meeting at the end of March. Once the allocation meeting is done, you will receive notification of the recommended allocations. We try to get those out either the week of our allocation meeting or the week right after, just letting you know that they have been approved for recommendation. All those recommendations will then go to the GOED executive director and then the governor for approval. And those, we try to get them out between April and May so that we can get your grant agreements out to you June 1st so that you have that time to have them signed and returned back to us. So the next step is that you'll be attending the CDBG grant administration workshop, which will be held actually this afternoon for our 2021 grant administrators. Those are always held May or June. We try to get them in May just because that's a little bit easier, or the first week in June. So then the next, I'm sorry, is there a question?
Yeah, Jessica, it's me, Erin.
Oh, hi.
Hi, I just had a quick question on the part where if you go back to step 1, 2, and 4, those public hearings, do they need to be time certain for a public hearing on the agenda?
So you need to make sure that when you post or publish that it's 14 days prior to the meeting. You have to post or publish 14 days prior to the meeting. We do request that the first public meeting be in July. And your second public meeting can be any time before October 15th.
Okay.
And then the third public meeting should be after October 15th. And that's just really to go over the projects that have been approved for application and then for you guys to prioritize those.
So just they don't necessarily have to be for a public hearing, like time certain on the agenda, as long as it's heard on the agenda for the public meeting.
Are you asking if they need to be on They do need to be on your agenda, yes.
Yeah,
So your first public meeting does not have to be a commission or board meeting. It can be, you can just hold the public meeting. The one public meeting that does need to be on your commission meeting would be your third public meeting, and that's for them to be able to approve those applications. And it should be agendized, yes.
yeah. So, but it doesn't matter how it's agendized, I guess is
No.
what I'm asking. It doesn't have to be time certain public hearing. It could be anywhere on the agenda.
Yes.
Okay.
I was gonna chime in and just say, Erin, at Fernley, we've never had a time on the agenda. It's just on the agenda at our council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so once we've sent out the award letter, the governor letter, and then the go-ed approval and grant agreements, how we do those is normally once they're all signed, we will scan them in and we will email a copy of those to the grant administrator that we have on file. And then the originals get mailed to the mayor or the chair that we have on file. We do check those. We go to your website. Sometimes I'll email you and just say, could you please confirm who your chair or your mayor, make sure your mayor is correct. Your websites are normally pretty correct and I don't have any questions, but every once in a while you might get an email from me just to confirm who they are. So the next steps would be that you need to make sure to return the signed agreement to us with the certifications, and then your grant agreement or your grant will begin July 1 of 2022. That is making sure that you also have your environmental review in with your application. We can do a note. Normally, if we have your grant agreement and your environmental review in and public service grants, this is normally, we're able to do this. We can do a notice to proceed July 1st of 2022. So planning grants, public service grants are always going to be 12 months. Construction grants are going to be 24 months. Okay, so does anyone have any questions on that part? Okay, so I am going to move on to, this is going to be kind of taken out a little bit because I'm going to go into ZoomGrants at the end of the presentation so that you guys can actually, I can show you a couple of things. Not much has changed with ZoomGrants, but we always want to kind of give you a refresher of it. So cities and counties, your subrecipients, your contractors, any vendor that you have working on this project must be registered and active in SAM.gov. We, towards mid-June, we check the cities and counties to make sure that you guys are active. Go-Ed has to make sure that we're actually active. So we make sure that we're active in SAM.gov also. It must be updated annually. So you may want to let any of your subrecipients know, any of your contractors know that they must do this annually. I've had it a couple of times where we've checked a subrecipient and it will be July 1 that we check them. And then when we get a draw request form in September, they may not be active. And so we cannot pay them until they are actually active in SAM.gov. So you just want to make sure that they're aware that they have to do this annually and we cannot give them any funds if they're not active. I'm just going to kind of go through what SAM.gov looks like and what we see when we are doing a SAM.gov. So this is just the front page of them. So you want to make sure you have the vendor name and the DUNS number. I will tell you the DUNS number is the easiest way to find a subrecipient or a grantee. The only reason that is because when you go in and put a vendor name, it could be different than what is on with the DUNS number, and it could show that they're not actually active or in SAM.gov. So I just always request that you send us in the DUNS number so that we can make it easier. So this is what it would look like if they're active. It actually just shows you right here that they're active. We do not see any personal information of theirs. We see their cage number, their DUNS number, and if they can work on a federally funded project. That is all. I know some subrecipients get a little worried that we can see banking information. I'm not able to see any of that. This is all that we look for. If you go in there and you do not find them, you may want to click this inactive button and then hit apply filter, because sometimes if they're not active, it will just show you this screen. And so this is what will come up, and it will say inactive for them. The other thing with SAM.gov is they have two options. They can make themselves public or they can make themselves private. If they make themselves private, we cannot see their information and I can't debar them. So you want to make sure that if they are in there and they're private, that they make themselves public. They can make themselves public, show me that they're active in SAM.gov, and then make themselves private again. But the one thing I will tell you is that we're going to look at their expiration date. And if their expiration date looks like it's getting close, when they get closer to the time that we're doing a draw request, they're going to need to make themselves public again so that we can see them and just make sure that they're still active. So I'm just giving you the form. So with SAM.gov, they did change it to where you now have to do a letter, have it notarized, and send in to them. So that does make it a little bit longer than it used to be. So just keep that in mind. And then these are just really kind of their forms. So what they're going to do is they're just going to check and make sure that you know, you have a cage number. If your subrecipient doesn't have a DUNS number, more than likely they're not going to be in SAM.gov. So just keep that in mind when you're talking to a subrecipient, you know, or a contractor. And then so we're going to go through census data and LMI eligibility. I'm going to kind of go through this a little bit fast. And the only reason that is because I am going to do the mapping tool that has a lot of this information in there. The mapping tool, in my view, is one of the better tools to use to determine eligibility on your project. And it is a HUD mapping tool, so it is updated regularly. So this slide is just going to give you the definition of what a census tract, block group, LMI-SD is. And you can use the LMI-SD. That will be updated in ZoomGrants also. I just actually got it, so I'm going to format it for the grantees, and I will send that out to everyone along with some other documents that I'm going to go over. 3 ways to establish, again, using the LMI-SD, going to the mapping tool, or conducting a survey. And then this link right here is actually really, it's a great link. It will get you to the mapping tool through HUD. It also has some census information on there. It has like a little video on there. So it's actually a really good tool if you guys want to go on there and just kind of look at that type of stuff. And then again, this is just really going over your LMI-A, clientele, how you do these things. And then for the census, the offices that you can contact if you have questions about census. And so these are the contact information on those people. And then conducting a survey, we've kind of already talked about conducting a survey. And, you know, these are why you may want to conduct a survey. If you go, again, if you go on the mapping tool and it says you're like 23% and you look and you say there's no way. So, you know, these are some of the reasons why you might want to do it, is if there's economic change, if there's change in population, and you look and you're like, this area is definitely, I know for a fact that it's LMI, but our mapping tool does not say that. This is just when you're conducting a survey, really what you're looking for is defining your service area, determining the boundaries, determining your sample size. Once you've done a survey, so you can do the survey or you can have an outside place do the survey. We actually have Nevada Rural Water. We have their contact information and they conduct surveys. Once you've done that, you want to send the survey to us. And again, the survey is good for 5 years unless there is a huge change in your economic boundary, your economy of your community, anything like that, then we would have to reevaluate those. So these are the contact information. Again, you can contact me or you can contact Stacy with Nevada Rural Water Association. Any questions on that? Okay, so we're going to go on to the application development. So again, all applications must have an environmental review. At some level, there has to be an environmental review. If your project is an exempt or a categorically excluded, not subject to, those documents need to be attached to the application. So we also, with your budget and your scope of work and your implementation schedule, we want you to be very clear on all of those documents. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of some documents for those. Scope of work, we really want you to be clear on what the project is and what you want CDBG to pay for. And then, you know, we all know CDBG, it's a long process. So you'll start July 1 of 2021 with your application, and you will not be able to actually implement your project until July 1 of 2022. And again, we go back to planning and public service grants are 12 months, construction grants are 24 months. Once you've hit submit in ZoomGrants, you're going to print out one full copy of the application along with all of the documentation that's attached to it, that the required documents, any supplemental documents that you put in there. You're going to bundle that all together and mail that to the CDBG office, one full copy. Additional submissions on those. A lot of times, you know, you guys put in your master plan or the consolidated plan. We don't need the full master plan. What we request is that you send us the first page that shows that it's the master plan, the table of contents that's referring to it, and it probably doesn't refer to the actual project, and then the pages that talk about the project, if that's what you're looking for. So those are the types of things that we're looking for when we're doing those. And you're wanting to make sure that your minutes are included in there, that your RDA letters are included in there, and we'll kind of go over those when we get into ZoomGrants. So your application scoring, this is actually what our advisory committee scores your applications on. So when you're going through your application, just keep this in mind. This is also in the application handbook, and it goes a little bit more into detail on what they're looking for. And I'll go ahead and send that out to everyone after the meeting, and it will be posted on our website probably mid-June. All of these documents will be posted onto the website. So before submitting, again, this is, you know, you're going to review your application. What I've always told people is once you are confident in your application, have someone else review it. And if they review it and they understand it, then it's probably good to go. Because I know that sometimes when we review things more than once, more than 5 times, we probably miss something because we're like, oh yeah, that sounds good, because we've reviewed it so many times. And so sometimes you want to go back and have someone else take a look at your application just so that they can look at it and say, oh yeah, I completely understand what you're wanting to do with this project. And again, applications are due to our office. They're due in ZoomGrants by February 18th. We do ask that by the Friday after we have the hard copy applications. The one thing with ZoomGrants that I will tell you is it says close of business day, but ZoomGrants will let you go up until midnight. So if you're running into the wire and you say, I am not going to get this in by 5 o'clock, I haven't gotten this document, you know, just let us know, email us and say this isn't going to be in until like 6 o'clock. And we're fine with that. Excuse me. Okay, so I am going to go to ZoomGrants. I just wanted to show you that we do keep this in our application presentation. And it's actually a really good thing just to have on basic grant writing. It goes over, you know, what you should be looking at. There is a slide in there that does say, you know, have someone else review your application to make sure that they understand it. So any questions on those? Okay, so I am gonna get out of here. I'm gonna do a stop share and then I'm gonna go into ZoomGrants. Okay. As you know, ZoomGrants is always kind of slow, so I apologize. So the couple things that I want to go over is the library. We have not updated it yet, so it will be updated July 1 when the 2022 grant cycle starts, and you'll be able to get all these documents. But I just kind of wanted to go through a couple of things. In the library, you always have the environmental review documents that you'll need, the instructions to fill out those documents, the HCTA citations. So this is the document that I actually showed you guys that had the yellow, and it's the brief version, but the CDBG state national objective, that is going to be the one that's expanded. So it's going to have more of the eligible activities that you can do. LMI-SD, this is the spreadsheet that we have every year. We send this out. It will be updated, and in here, the NIAX codes you guys will need, and then the HUD mapping tool. I am actually going to go into there. Excuse me. Okay. So here is the HUD mapping tool. Your first step is always going to be to go up here, and you can put in your community, you can put in your address, you can do a bunch of things. So I'm just going to do, I'll put in Carson, oops, Carson City. And if you start typing in, normally it's going to figure out where you're wanting to go. This includes addresses. A lot of times I'll just start typing in the number and then the name, and it will populate anything that's close to that. So on this mapping tool, you want to make sure that you are going into the little dot in the middle of that X, and it's always going to say search 1 of 7, 1 of. It will be different depending on the filters that you have on your mapping tool. If you pull it from ZoomGrants, it should always be the same, but sometimes it's not. So you're going to go to this little arrow and click on that, and it's going to do a highlight of Carson City. And you just want to make sure you go to, so I'm going to go to, let's see, excuse me, sorry, one that has the block group and census tract. So this right here is just telling me that this is block group 1, census tract 1, and then you're going to go down here, and this is really what you're looking for, is this 38.57. So that means that this census tract is not LMI. So they would not be able to do an LMI area project in that area. And so when you are getting ready to add this to ZoomGrants, you want to make sure that you are getting, and it's not going to do it, this number here, but you also want to make sure, and sometimes it's hard to get it, that you're getting the block group and the census tract. And some people are able to print this map out. I have the hardest time printing it out, so I just do the snippet tool and make sure that I get the full document in there with the LMI-SD up here and that it's the Ezra down here. So I will just drag from the top all the way down to this corner, making sure that I get this, because this is one thing that is going to change with ZoomGrants, is that in your eligibility, you must have this map. Somehow you either have to have the map or the LMI-SD that shows us how you've qualified, how you've made your eligibility for the national objective LMI. So I just wanted to show you that. I can also do, I'll do my, so if you see, that's all I had to put in there, and it automatically gives me the address that I want. And again, I'm going to go in there if it's a building that you're looking for, that you're wanting to see if it's low to moderate income. So you can do that if you have the address, and then go through and check. And the one cool thing about this one is that if I go through, and let me see if it's gonna, this little blue line right here, that's telling me that this is in this area, that it's in this block group and this census tract. Again, it's 27.38, so it doesn't qualify, but that's other ways that you can use this mapping tool. The mapping tool is a great tool to use. Even if you're doing a low to moderate income clientele project, you still have to have the map or the LMI-SD. So you still have to have that information in there. Is there any questions on the mapping tool? Okay, and if you have any issues with it, please feel free to give me a call, and we can work through those, and I can walk you through it. A lot of the times, what people have the hardest time with is this little tiny dot, because you can't see it. And so just make sure that you're clicking into that dot and getting your search results up here at the top. Okay, so I'm going to go back to ZoomGrants. And then again, the method of distribution will be updated and the handbook will be updated. My version is a little bit different than your version. So on ZoomGrants, when you go in there, the grant administrator is going to be the one that always needs to make sure that they are initiating the eligibility for the application. And then they can make a collaborator. So you can, if you have a subrecipient, or if you have your financial department that you want to do a portion of the application, you can make them a collaborator and add them to the eligibility and application. The one thing about eligibility, that the grant administrator always has to be the one to submit the eligibility. So for some reason in eligibility, it will let your subrecipients submit that, but that's not correct. And so if you see it like October 15th, when eligibility is due and it's been submitted by your subrecipient, if you contact me and say, hey, Jessica, you know, so-and-so submitted this and I know that they're not supposed to submit it, can you unsubmit that? We can go ahead and do that for you. But just remember that you as a grant administrator must be the one to submit eligibility. So what we normally ask is that you just email your subrecipients and tell them, I need you to make sure that I have the eligibility completed by this date so I can submit it. And you just want to, when you're looking at, you want to make sure that when you go through the eligibility that you, if you have a subrecipient, that this information is completed. The subrecipient information, they have their DUNS number, that the HCTA citation is in there, and that and that it has what type of project this is. If it's a public service, if it's a planning grant, and then your national objective. So these 3, 4, 5, and 6 are your national objectives. We will have it say, like up here where it says national objective, each one of them will say national objective. You pick one of those. So it's either low to moderate income persons, SLUM and BLIGHT, or an urgent need. So, and just on, sorry. Oh, let's try and mute that person, but it won't let me. On the low to moderate income persons, the survey is the survey that we approve. So a lot of times people will put that on there. It's only if we have approved that survey. Okay, so the beneficiaries on here, again, you're gonna put, and this is if you're doing a low to moderate income clientele project, you can go ahead and put how many of the the people you think that you will serve. So if you're going to serve 300 people and 160 of those people are low to moderate income, you're going to go ahead and put those in here. If you're doing an area-wide benefit, you want to take those numbers off of the mapping tool and go ahead and put them in here, and it will give you an actual total at the bottom. Don't worry about the total. It's a weird thing with ZoomGrants that it totals everything for me. So just keep that in mind. On the provide the HUD LMI-SD or the US Census, where it says web link or HUD LMI-SD, you do not have to put the web link in here. It will not let you put the web link in here. It's too long. All you have to type in there is that you've either used the web link or you've used the HUD LMI-SD, and then the census tract and the block group that you've used. And then this one is, again, if it's a income survey, you just put none if you didn't do one. The brief scope of work, this is really be clear, concise. This is what you want us to pay for. This is what the project is. You only have 1,500 characters that you can use on this. So just keep in mind that when you move on to the application step, you are able to expand the scope of work. So this one should just be really, this is what the project is. This is what we're wanting CDBG to pay for. And then these questions are very self-explanatory if it's a larger project. And number 13, so I get a lot of sub-recipients that do number 13 and say no. It's really the city or county if they're expecting the $750,000 a year in direct or indirect federal funds. So just remember that as the grant administrator, you really need to be watching and paying attention to what they're putting into this and double checking it to make sure that it's correct for the city also. Okay, so I'm not going to go over the application questions unless you guys have questions about those. And that's just because they're not changing. They're the exact same application questions as we have last year. I am going to go over the budget, and the only reason I'm going to do this is to kind of give a couple of quick tips on those. So in the budget, the first section is funding sources and revenue. So your first line item is going to be your CDBG requested amount. So this should be CDBG, your amount. And then your other ones are going to be any leveraging funds that you have. If you have match from USDA or a nonprofit, Pennington Foundation, any one of those, that's going to go here, and then the amount in the location. Down below where it says funding uses and tasks, this is going to be the actual tasks that are going to be for your project. So if it's construction, you're going to put that here, and then CDBG is 200,000, local cash is 50,000. And this actually is what is going to go into your grant agreement, the budget. So just watch with those. And then the other thing that I'm going to talk about is the implementation schedule that we have. So your grant should always start July 1, and this should say project setup, grant agreement approval, and then your time frame will be July 1 to July 15th, however long that should go. We do have an example of a implementation schedule that we will send out to you. Almost every project is going to have some type of procurement, whether it's for a consultant, whether it's for a construction. And so we have the sample that I'm going to send out goes into more detail on those. And then your project implementation is going to be the construction of the project, the planning of the project, any of those. And then project closeout should always be your final line item in there should be CDBG closeout documents. And then it should be the either June 30th, 2022 or I'm sorry, 2023 or June 30th, 2024. So those are just a couple of tips on those. And then in the required documents, So I did say that the LMI-SD and the GIS map, those will actually be in eligibility, and they will be a required document that you must have those in your required documents. So the only thing that's really going to change, because we've noticed that it's kind of a duplicate thing, is this letter of committed on secured funds. So it's going to be one letter that you just need to put in there, and all it needs to be is on city or county letterhead. Do you have matching funds? And if you do have matching funds, what is the source of that funding and what is the amount of that funding? So that's just going to be one letter that you just need to stick in one spot. Again, the required documents are the minutes of your public meetings. We understand that you are not always going to have all 3 public meetings done and completed. You should at least have 2 of your public meetings done, but sometimes you may have your 3rd public meeting right before you turn in your application. That's fine. We will probably reach out to you if we see that they're not in there and ask for those meeting minutes. So that is ZoomGrants. Do you guys have any questions on ZoomGrants? Do you have any questions? Okay. I just want to make sure I don't have anything. Oh, I did want to mention, when I sent out the PowerPoint in your meeting invite today, there was a CDBG grant cycle timeline, and I am going to share my screen again so you guys can see it. So we put this together because we just thought it was kind of, and we're going to be doing this for other things within CDBG, but it's kind of like just a quick checklist of making sure that you have done everything that you need to do in the timelines. We thought it would be really good for you guys and also for me to remember that these things are needing to get done. So, and if you have any questions on this timeline, or if there's anything in it that you kind of look at and you say, I don't remember it being this way, anything like that, please feel free to reach out to us and let us know. But we are going to try and do more of these kind of quick checklists for construction grants, procurement grants. We just thought it was kind of a good way to keep everyone kind of on track and making sure that we all know what we need to be doing. So is there any questions from you guys about anything that I've gone over?
Yeah, this is
okay.
Midiana with Carson City, and I just wanted you to remind me on the public service projects. I believe they can apply for 2 years in a row, but after the 2nd year, they have to show that their clients have increased or their business has expanded. Is that still correct?
So on any public service grant, so year 1 is going to be their kind of their base year. Your year 2, they need to show that they're having a quantifiable increase in the services. And then we're going into 3 years. Year 3, they still need to show that it's increase from year 2. So they're going to have to keep track of all of those to show that they're actually increasing their services or that it's a new service.
And then that's it. They don't get to apply for a 4th year, right? I mean, is that correct? Or
yeah, it should not be a consistent funding source for them. They should then want to be able to go out and get other funding sources from other agencies.
so I guess the question is, because I do have a couple public service projects or programs, and I know they're going to want to apply again this year, and it'll be probably their 3rd or 4th year. So I wasn't really sure if I should be telling them no, or if they can apply showing an increase, or at what point do I say, you know, this grant is over?
Let's talk offline on that one, because I think I know what project you're talking about.
Yes.
and I do have questions. So, but yeah, you need to determine when you feel like it's time for them to seek other funding sources.
Okay.
And we can look at that and maybe give them some examples of other funding sources too. That's kind of where I look at it with public service grants is maybe they don't know that there's other grants out there that can do this, but CDBG is not to be a continuous funding source for their budgets.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from anyone? Okay, if you do, I'm always here. Please feel free to give me a call, email me, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I do appreciate you guys taking time out of your, I know, busy days to be here with me and go over this stuff. And I look forward to the applications that I hope are coming in from this webinar. So if there are no other questions, I am going to let you guys go.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.